I'm inviting my guest who will show how science, local initiatives, entrepreneurship intersect and contribute to make this fight stronger. Please welcome Alizée Ruel of Flamingo, Hannah Schragmann representing Soilytix, and Dauert from Wildya. Please join me on stage. Welcome. How are you doing all today? Alizée, Ruel, you're initially an engineer. You're now the Chief Operating Officer and co-founder of Flamingo. When we thought of biodiversity some years ago, we usually thought of birds and flowers and trees, but that is changing. And now we know there is much more to it, thanks to actions and commitments like yours. Tell us about Flamingo and why you decide to work specifically with wetlands.
Good morning, everyone. So, I'm really happy to be here and to talk about these amazing wetlands today. So, the thing about wetlands is that if I ask you to picture a wetland in your mind, you may see like a muddy place with some mosquitoes or home of dangerous place. And that's not only that. It's like really critical and vital for our survival, for biodiversity. And I will give you two numbers to help you realize that. The first one is 6%. So wetlands are covering 6% of the Earth's surface. And in this 6%, they are home to 40% of all the species living in the world. So, I mean, all the frogs are depending on wetlands, half the birds, the flamingo, the egrets, some plants. They are using wetlands to reproduce, to grow, to feed. So we cannot preserve biodiversity if we do not preserve wetlands. And the thing that a few knows, and maybe nobody knows, is that we are destroying them, and they are today disappearing 3 times faster than forests. So this is the reason why we decided to create Flamingo and to throw all our energy into saving them and finding solutions to finance them in a more bigger way that we are doing right now.
Thank you for that. And for you to know, we're going to be speaking a little bit more about wetlands with almost all speakers. But I want to go to Hannah Schragmann. You're Soilytix Chief Biodiversity Officer, and you've got a thorough experience working with sustainability, ecology, and economics. Throughout the course of this conversation, we will dive into the ways biodiversity can be effectively protected, and one of them might be Soilytix. And through a very innovative process, you're actually decoding soil DNA. Tell us how you're doing that and why it is so important to focus on soil to tackle the climate crisis and biodiversity crisis.
Yes, thank you so much. I think what's really important to understand is that to really protect biodiversity, we need to understand it. We need to really understand the mechanisms for it and understand also its importance. And what's really interesting is that with new technology, we can basically get a new picture of the biodiversity under our feet. So using environmental DNA, we can decode the whole genetic material that we find in the environment and really then understand how this biodiversity not just looks like in terms of how many species are present, but how it actually functions, how the species are working together. And we basically can analyze environmental DNA from air, from water, from everywhere. But we at Soilytix, we focus on the soil because basically 50% of all the world's biodiversity is hosted by soils. But we often, when we speak about biodiversity, we speak about the beautiful mammals, about elephants, etc. But basically, every above ground biodiversity that we see is, finds its basis in below ground biodiversity. And what's also really interesting is that the soil is a real data treasure chest. Because very often, if we, for example, restore an ecosystem, we can see the effects of the changes, like species returning, only years afterwards above ground. But the soil microbiome, so all these tiny organisms that live in the soil, they react super quickly to changes and to land management changes. So you can early on also see if your restoration activity has success. And already what Alizée said, when you look at soil, 40% of our world soils are degraded at the moment, threatening the very biodiversity that sustains us, and that's mainly due to intensive agricultural activity. And we need to start to safeguard that. We've been speaking a lot about in the last days about basically projections around climate, around biodiversity loss, but not so much about the topic of land degradation. So we need to start restoring land, and we need to start in that sense at what is at the roots, so at the soil.
Thank you very much for that, Hannah. Olivier, Dauert, you are a biodiversity builder, Oliver, founder of Wildya, and you've worked championing nature-related entrepreneurship. You're actually creating an ecosystem to make this mission the top priority, right? How are you doing that with Wildya?
Yeah, thank you so much. We're doing this with Wildya because we believe we have enough millionaires. I think we need more impact billionaires. We need crazy people that want to rewild 1 million bison, people that want to restore 1 million corals, people that want to remove 1 million kilograms of plastic trash from the oceans. And what we see right now is there's a really clear gap of, we know how to become a millionaire in theory. There's tons of books and YouTube and movies about it, but there's not so much resources about it if you actually want to create the really positive impact on our world. And what's the blueprint like? Where do I start? What's the first coral? How can I plant the first coral? How can I get attention for my mission? How can I create a sustainable model so that I can actually pay my rent and hopefully get more people embarked in this? And we do this basically through 4 different things. One is awareness creation, because as you all know, biodiversity is still flying under the radar. The second one is creating a community with online events, offline events, because we need to share within our bubble the best practices, the tools, the ways how we can really scale our impact action. The fourth is like boot camps, so attention, and especially how to play the business model, because we need to sustainably finance so that we can scale our impact action. And then we also work on one-to-one basis.
On?
On one-to-one basis.
One-to-one basis, okay, thank you. I'm gonna ask you all, I'm starting with Hannah, how the work that you're doing with soil measurement, for example, can change the way in which we are addressing the frameworks that the world's been following for biodiversity protection. Maybe you could take us to some examples of Soilytix in action so we understand how you're changing this general paradigm.
That's a great question, and I think what's really important to understand is that often, for example, in agriculture, we look at land thinking about how much yield we can squeeze out. We want to really, in the short run, try to increase agricultural productivity at the sake of the long-term reproductivity of the soil, which will also in the future affect also economically what sort of food we can actually harvest. So we really want to work on this topic and really deep dive into the soil and start also valuing land for its basically parameters like biodiversity, like soil resilience, reproductivity of the soil microbiome with all the important functions that it provides on a daily basis. I think that's super important. For example, we work with nut producers in Portugal that really try to understand how the soil biodiversity drives the sustainable walnut production, and also work with their basically land managers that will change the way they report about land. Not just looking at yield drivers at the moment, but really valuing land for the long-term ability of the soil to provide its ecosystem functions and to sustainably increase yield. And I think that's really important that we start going away from the wrong metrics to the right metrics. And particularly in agriculture, I mean, in the 60s, there was this big green revolution where we started to get way more efficient. We switched to monocultures. We included a lot of fertilizer to increase production. And still nowadays, when we look at economic metrics, we see in the 60s this huge agricultural productivity increase. But nowadays, the soils, because of that, are degraded. People suffer from mental health issues, from basically cancer because of fertilizer usage. So we need to switch that narrative and really start thinking reproductivity, resilience, soil health, rather than looking at short-term yield. And that's really what we're trying to do, and why we are very happy that also a lot of companies, land managers, also forest owners are realizing we need to move away from this productivity regime and start looking at resilience, and biodiversity is a huge part of resilience.
Thank you. And Alizée, what are these actions being undertaken by Flamingo? We know that you've developed crowdfunding as a tool, but tell us why crowdfunding and what are the overall actions you're undertaking?
Yeah, indeed, we had a crowdfunding platform, but we are not doing only crowdfunding. And we have 2 missions. The first one is to raise awareness on wetlands. And the thing about wetlands is that we have a really misperception about them. So we want to create new stories. We want to show them in a different light. So we can change the perception you might probably have about them, and so that we could preserve them. So this is the first mission, and this is part of the reason why I'm here today at ChangeNOW. And the second mission is to develop like a toolbox to finance wetland projects, because we want to find more tools to finance them far more than the level we are financing them right now. So we choose the crowdfunding at the first one tool, because for us this is the best way to both raise awareness and collect money to help all this scientific working for wetlands restoration, preservation, conservation. But we are also working to offer crowdfunding for companies. So if they have like a CSR strategy and want to support some project with huge biodiversity and climate impact, they can do it. And we hope to mobilize millions on wetlands projects, so we can change.
Yeah, it's good that you say it, because sometimes when we hear, the common human, we hear crowdfunding, you always think about like common people also, and you could ask yourself, why would you ask, the individuals to be the only ones to contribute to that project? So there is also this.
And this is really an important thing to us. Like, we think that the ecological transition, we should all be part of it, every kind of actors, so individuals, but also companies. And this is why it is important to develop some tools for all these kind of actors. And
Sure. Thank you so much for that. I'm sure that we will start seeing biodiversity in more and more places with our eyes, not only with the knowledge of it, but also because of the impact our activities are having on our ecosystems. And this is for all stages of consciousness on environmental issues, from politicians to big companies, from entrepreneurs to civil society as individuals. Oliver, this is for you. Could you please tell us how Wildya is contributing to that shift of mindsets concerning the way we address biodiversity protection, and what have been the main challenges on this perspective?
All right, I start with the challenge, money. Just a little story from yesterday. We had like a biodiversity meetup, and I asked the room, we were roughly 40 to 50 people, raise your arm if you're a biodiversity solution provider, and like half of the room split up. Okay, who else is in education? Arms up. Weavers, arms up. Okay, who is a corporate that would like to maybe support these initiatives? There were not that many arms, let me tell you that. And then also, who would like to finance actually this really crucial world that we're all dependent on? One arm went up. So money is definitely the biggest challenge in our biodiversity bubble. Money is not bad, money is a tool, and we have to use it more to reward the world. And how we are really trying to shift people's mind is, a lot of the story and a lot of the narrative is still about like, it's the elephants, it's the bees, it's lovely to look at. And we need to come away from this is a nice to have to more it's a must to have. What kind of cars we drive, what kind of flats, what kind of shoes we wear, all of this really, really doesn't matter. What really matters is the base of life, and that is biodiversity, because it gives us oxygen, it gives us food, medicine, water. Everything depends on nature, so we need to shift and we need to bring more of those arguments to the people and personalize our arguments to the person that is in front of us. If it's a policymaker, if it's a CEO, if it's an artist, we can all be part of this, and we just need to speak a language so that they understand, this actually matters to me too.
Thank you. At the beginning of the session, I mentioned the Paris Agreement and its 10-year anniversary. We've had ups and downs, but nobody can deny that it was a major step in the commitment of political actors to tackle climate change. After COP16 for biodiversity last year in Cali, the realization is that there's still so much to be done to comply with the Paris Agreement for nature, as we call it, the Global Biodiversity Framework. What are your hopes and mission in this direction? Hannah, for example.
I mean, for us, the topic of a new reproductive green transition in agriculture is, of course, where we really try to work for. And the one thing that for us is so important to change is that really we stop, subsidizing also on an EU level, basically the wrong sort of agriculture on a daily basis. Basically the large growers that use monocultures, really large fertilizers, they get the money, and the small farms that really want to transition or already do things the right way, they don't. And we really need to stop that. We need to stop basically compacting and polluting soil now and try to work together with farmers to understand how can we enable you, how can we provide you with financing for monitoring and for also these 3 years, which are usually difficult to finance when you transition from conventional to green. I mean, there is this gap in yield. How can we finance that? And I think, for example, in Denmark, there was a really big revolution. They really managed for the first time on a governmental level to work with farmers to find a way where, in the short run, tax is basically reduced for farmers, and then in the long run, after 5 years, basically farmers have to pay more if they haven't transitioned in the meantime to green. So they found a way with farmers, with the community together, to work on a way to finance this transition and reward in the long run the ones that do it differently. And I think here we really need to find and sit together on a table, because there's also on a political level so much polarization in agriculture. There's the Greens against the farmers, and I feel like in general this doesn't lead anywhere. And farmers also, of course, know that for them a long-term reproductive soil is their biggest asset. There's just so much ideology in there, and we really want to speak with different actors and try to understand how we can change that narrative, and of course really speak a lot with policymakers and get that message across. Also with the Riyadh Action Agenda, which followed the UNCCD COP last year in Saudi Arabia, which was speaking a lot about land restoration, really trying to understand how can we really mobilize these $2 trillion needed to restore 1.5 billion hectares of land till 2030. And for that we need finance from all over the place, and really trying to speak to as many people as possible and get them in the same room and try to break ideology, which is hindering, I think, everyone from creating a long-lasting change.
Thank you for that. Climate and biodiversity together also. Oliver, what's your path towards the next COP in Armenia? For biodiversity, of course.
For biodiversity, I think I spoiled it a bit in the part before. I think we need to really put, if we really believe in this global biodiversity framework, which is the Paris Agreement for nature, then we finally need to give it the teeth and the claws of nature to really give it the power that is needed to build the change that we really need. And again, that is money. All policy, all kind of speeches, all kind of nice action items, strategies, it doesn't matter. We need to, nature does all the services for free for us. So the least that we can do is now to protect, restore, and really make sure that we shift. Right now, 7 trillion go into harming nature from our governments, from our companies, and only 250 billion go into actually positive nature. So we shift this, and we will be so much better. We will have cleaner air. We will be abundant with life. There will be actually flocks of birds going over us. And it's all we can all realize this together. But we need to be able to say, okay, we get value out of this, so we're also happy to pay for this. I think that's,
Thank you. Alizée?
We have kind of huge expectation because we destroy so many wetlands, up to 85% for the 300 last years. But if we want to repair all that we've damaged, we need huge goal. And I think that maybe just a keyword to share with you, if we want to stay under the 1.5 limit degrees, then we have to restore 30% of all the peatlands. So I think, sorry, I will be not really original, but the main point will be to collect more funds so we can restore, preserve more wetlands. And the second one, but I think it's the most important one, maybe it's to raise more awareness on politicians, on representatives, so they can realize that we can reconcile economy and biodiversity and wetlands, and so they can realize that wetlands are part of a big ecosystem and we need them to fight against climate change and biodiversity loss.
Thank you. I'm gonna end this conversation in a panel with a personal and maybe as an entrepreneur question. You can answer as an entrepreneur, but I feel it's quite personal. I'm going to think about what Prasidi said at the beginning. on the question of success, redefining success. I just want to hear it from each one of you in very few words, and we will end like that. If you could give us an idea of Soilytix, Wildya, Flamingo being successful solutions, they are already because they exist and you made the effort on bringing them to life. But then if you imagine them, how would it be? How would you imagine your solutions as a happy and accomplished one? Maybe Oliver?
All right, I always jokingly say, I hope my company goes extinct. The only vision that I have for the future that companies like mine shouldn't exist. And that's what I really kind of work towards every single day. I would love to just be in the African bush right now, just looking at elephants, just enjoying the scenery. I can't do that because we need to build a world that is actually works really in coexistence with all the other animals, plants, fungi, and so forth. So my ideal vision, the company I'm building right now doesn't exist because we did such a hell of a job.
Great answer. Alizée?
Yeah, during the introduction, we speak about how to learn to be best friend again with nature. So maybe it will be like to be best friend with wetlands again. And maybe I wish that ChangeNOW 2030, you will have all the conference here speaking about wetlands.
We wish we could do that. Hannah, how about you?
For me, it would really be that everyone recognizes that the soil is alive. I mean, historically, we only looked at chemics, physics of the soil, but really it's about soil biology, and soil is the most complex, substance on human Earth. Our team comes from precision medicine, and studying blood is easy compared to soil, because it's such a super diverse mechanism that we can learn so much from. And I think getting excited about these networks, getting excited about earthworms, getting really excited about, this substance, and not calling it dirt, but really understanding this is Mother Earth. When we celebrate Earth Day, this is the basis of all. We don't want to live in a world of interstellar where we all breathe in dirt every day, like actual dirt, dead Earth. This is something that I really thrive for, that we realize this is an alive substance and we want to keep it alive.
Thank you. And we really wish you that kind of success, the one that each one of you wishes for each solution. Please, thank you, all of the three of you, for your passion first, because while preparing this session, I could really feel the fact that you are entrepreneurs, but also activists of what you're doing. Your clarity also, and the will to make part of this movement that we're having here at ChangeNOW to put nature and the living as a priority. Please give them a warm applause. Hannah Schragmann, Alizée, Ruel, Oliver, Dauert.